My name is Sarah Whitfield. I am 38 years old. And 3 months ago, I stood in my own driveway with 2 suitcases, pretending to drive away from my marriage, so I could park around the corner, walk back through the neighbor's yard, and listen to my husband on a baby monitor I never turned off. I need you to understand something before I tell you what he said. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't start fights. I don't snoop through phones. For 11 years I gave Michael the benefit of the doubt so many times that I started to lose count. So when I tell you I stood behind Karen Ellis's rose bushes at 9 o'clock at night, barefoot, holding my breath, straining to hear my husband's voice through a plastic speaker meant for our daughter's nursery, please believe me when I say it took everything I had to get there. It started small. That's how it always starts. A phone that got turned face down. A work trip that didn't show up on the shared calendar. A 4 a.m. text that made him smile before he caught himself and wiped the expression off his face like a spill. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things. Michael and I met at a mutual friend's wedding when I was 26. He was funny then, and attentive, the kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee after one conversation. We got married 2 years later. We bought a house in Maple Grove, Ohio, with a porch swing and a maple tree in the front yard that I'd stood under during our engagement photos. We tried for a baby for 4 years before Emma was born, and when she finally came, I thought that was it. I thought we'd made it through the hard part. I was wrong. The hard part hadn't started yet. The change happened about 8 months after Emma's first birthday. Michael got a promotion at his firm, senior director, more money, more travel. I was proud of him. I threw him a small dinner with his parents. His mother, Karen, raised a glass and said, "Finally, the life you deserve, sweetheart," and I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say to a man who already had a wife and a daughter. I didn't think about it again until the following spring, when I found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, a hotel 40 minutes from our house, dated a Tuesday. He'd told me he was in Chicago. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I told myself there could be an explanation. A colleague's room he'd booked. A mistake on the card. Then I found a second receipt. Then a third. I started noticing other things too. Money moving between our joint account and one I didn't recognize. A safety deposit box statement addressed only to him. A new gym membership he never used, at a gym I later learned had none of his usual equipment, just a lobby, and a coffee shop next door where, it turned out, a woman named Jennifer Cole liked to sit on Tuesday afternoons. I still didn't say anything. I know how that sounds. But I needed proof, not suspicion, because I knew Michael. He was smart. He was charming. If I came at him with nothing but a feeling, he'd talk his way around it, and I'd end up apologizing to him by the end of the conversation. That's what he did. That's what he'd always done. So I made a decision that changed everything. I told him I needed space. I told him I was taking Emma to my sister's for 2 weeks to think about us. I packed 2 suitcases in front of him, cried real tears, because some of them were real, and drove away from our house like a woman leaving her marriage. Except I wasn't. I dropped Emma at my sister Lisa's, drove back into town, and parked 3 streets over at my neighbor Karen Ellis's house, a woman who had no relation to my mother-in-law and who, God bless her, let me sit in her guest room with a baby monitor app open on my phone, watching the little green light blink from our nursery 2 houses down. Here is something people don't tell you about baby monitors. The good ones, the kind we'd bought, top of the line, because I wanted to hear Emma if she so much as sighed in her sleep, they don't just pick up a crying baby. They pick up everything in that room. Every conversation. Every phone call taken in the doorway because someone thinks a closed nursery door means privacy. Michael thought I was gone. He thought he had 2 weeks. The first night, nothing. He watched TV, went to bed early. I almost felt foolish, crouched in Karen's guest room with my phone against my ear like a teenager. I almost called the whole thing off in my head, told myself I'd imagined the worst of it. The second night, at 9:47 p.m., I heard the nursery door open. I heard his voice first, low, and then a woman's voice, not on speaker, but close, like they were both leaning over a phone. I recognized her voice before I even let myself admit it. Jennifer. Is she really gone? Jennifer asked. 2 weeks, Michael said. Maybe longer if I play it right. She's a mess right now, Jen. This is exactly what we needed. My chest went tight. But that wasn't the part that froze me. That part came 30 seconds later. So the appointment's set, Jennifer said. Dr. Holbrook, next Thursday. You just need her to say the things she's been saying. On record. She will, Michael said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, the one I used to love, the one that made me feel like the only woman in the room. She's exhausted, she's paranoid, she thinks I'm cheating on her, she'll say all of it herself. I don't even have to lie. And once he writes it up. Unfit, Michael said. Anxious, unstable, delusional. Custody goes to me. The house goes to me. Her father's trust, Sarah's name is on it, but with a competency finding, that becomes a different conversation entirely. I stood in Karen Ellis's guest room with my hand pressed over my mouth, and I understood, all at once, exactly what kind of man I had built a life with. My father died 2 years before Emma was born. He left me a trust, not a fortune, but enough. Enough that Michael had asked about it more than once over the years, framed as concern, as planning. We should talk to someone about consolidating our finances, he'd say. It's smarter that way. I'd always deflected. Some instinct in me, some quiet animal part of my brain, had never let him near that account. Now I understood why that instinct existed. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been building a case against me, for over a year, it turned out, based on what I heard that night. Every time I'd gotten upset about a hotel receipt, every time I'd cried and asked where he'd been, every time I had, in his words, been paranoid, he'd been collecting it. Recording some of it, I would later learn, on his phone, for Dr. Holbrook. Dr. Holbrook. I wrote the name on my palm in pen because I didn't trust myself to remember it through the shaking. Jennifer's voice again, what about the daughter? Emma stays with me, Michael said. Sarah's not going to look stable enough to fight for full custody once this appointment goes on record. Judges don't like unstable and paranoid mothers, Jen. They like fathers who step up. I sat down on the edge of Karen's guest bed because my legs didn't feel like they belonged to me anymore. 11 years. A miscarriage we grieved together. A daughter we'd waited 4 years for. A house with a porch swing. And the entire time, somewhere behind his eyes, he had been drawing up an exit that used our daughter and my father's memory as tools. I could have walked back into that house that night and screamed at him. Part of me wanted to. But I thought about Emma, 16 months old, asleep at my sister's house. I thought about a judge reading a report from a psychiatrist my husband had already chosen, already briefed. I thought about what unstable would sound like next to my name in a custody filing. So I did the only thing that made sense. I went back to Karen's guest room, opened a blank note on my phone, and started writing down everything I'd just heard, word for word, while it was still fresh enough to bleed onto the page. I didn't go home to confront him. I went home to become someone he didn't recognize, calm, agreeable, exactly the version of me his plan required, except now I knew the script. I called him the next morning, voice soft, and told him I'd been doing some thinking, that maybe some space had been good for us, that I wanted to come back early. He sounded almost disappointed for half a second before he recovered. Of course, honey. Come home. We'll figure this out together. Together. I nearly laughed into the phone. For the next 6 weeks, I played the most exhausting role of my life. I let him think I was fragile. I let him think his plan was working. And every single day, I built the opposite case in secret. I found a family law attorney 2 towns over, a woman named Rachel Ortiz, who specialized in exactly this kind of thing, coercive control disguised as concern, manufactured psychiatric narratives used in custody disputes. When I played her the audio from that night, because yes, I'd hit record on my own phone the moment I understood what I was hearing, she went very quiet, and then she said, "Sarah, this is one of the more calculated things I've seen in 15 years of practice. We're going to need everything. Bank records. Emails. Anything with Dr. Holbrook's name on it." So I got it. I made copies of financial statements before he could hide them further. I found the emails between Michael and a colleague of his, a man named Robert Doyle, who worked in the same office and apparently thought it was funny to joke over email about Operation Fresh Start, their nickname, I later learned, for Michael's plan to divorce me and marry Jennifer once the trust money was untangled. I got a printout of the standing appointment with Dr. Holbrook. I even got, through Rachel's investigator, phone records placing Michael and Jennifer at that hotel 11 separate times over 14 months. I did all of it while making his coffee in the morning and asking about his day at night. I have never worked harder at anything in my life than I worked at appearing exactly as broken as he needed me to be. The Thursday appointment with Dr. Holbrook came. I went. I sat in that office and I answered every question honestly, but not the way Michael expected. "Do you feel your husband has been supportive?" Dr. Holbrook asked, pen ready. "I used to think so," I said. "Recently I've learned some things that changed my understanding of our marriage significantly. I'd like to tell you about them, if that's all right, and I have documentation." I watched the pen stop moving. I watched Dr. Holbrook's expression shift from clinical neutrality to something closer to concern, not for my mental state, but for what he was about to hear. I laid it out calmly. The affair. The recorded conversation about the appointment and the finding. The trust. I even played him 12 seconds of the audio, the part where Michael said, "She'll say all of it herself, I don't even have to lie." Dr. Holbrook closed his notepad. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said carefully, "I think you should know I was contacted by your husband several weeks ago about writing an evaluation for custody purposes. Given what you've just shown me, I won't be doing that. I'd also encourage you to have your attorney reach out to me directly about anything I've documented so far." I walked out of that office and sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for the first time in 6 weeks, not from grief this time, but from something closer to relief, the exhausting kind, the kind that comes after holding your breath for far too long. That night, I filed. Rachel had everything ready, the audio, the financial records, the emails, Dr. Holbrook's statement declining to proceed and noting the circumstances. Michael was served divorce papers at his office 3 days later, in front of Robert Doyle, in front of the same colleagues who'd laughed along with Operation Fresh Start. He came home that night white-faced, holding the papers like they might change if he looked at them long enough. "Sarah, what is this? What did you?" "I turned the baby monitor on," I said. "The night I left. I heard everything, Michael. The appointment. The custody plan. My trust. Jennifer. All of it." I watched something collapse behind his eyes, not guilt, I don't think, not really. More like the specific panic of a man who realizes his audience has been watching the whole performance from backstage. "I can explain." "You don't get to," I said. "You spent a year building a case to take my daughter and my father's money by making a doctor believe I was losing my mind. So no. You don't get to explain. You get to talk to my attorney." He tried everything over the following months. He tried charm first, showing up with flowers, telling Lisa I was overreacting. When that failed, he tried the story he'd originally planned, telling mutual friends I was unstable, that the divorce was my doing, that he didn't understand what had happened to me. But Rachel had built a file so thorough that it didn't matter what he told people at dinner parties. The trust stayed protected, untouched, exactly where my father had left it. The custody evaluation, a real one, done independently, ordered by the judge once the recording was entered into evidence, found no concerns about my parenting and considerable concerns about Michael's judgment and honesty. Jennifer stopped answering his calls once his name started appearing in local legal filings with words like concealment and fraudulent inducement attached to it. Robert Doyle's firm quietly let him go after Operation Fresh Start got forwarded, by someone, to HR. I never asked who, and I never needed to. The divorce was finalized 8 months after that night behind Karen Ellis's rose bushes. I got the house. I got primary custody of Emma, with supervised visitation for Michael that a family court aide monitors, at least for now. I kept my father's trust exactly as he left it, and for the first time in years, I opened the statement without feeling a flicker of guilt about protecting it. Michael moved into an apartment across town. Jennifer, from what I've heard through the very small, very efficient gossip network of a town like Maple Grove, moved on to someone else entirely within the year. His mother, Karen, called me once, months later, and said, in a voice that tried very hard to sound gentle, "I hope you two can find a way to co-parent peacefully." I told her I hoped so too, and that peace, for me, now included a lawyer's phone number saved at the top of my contacts. Some nights I still think about that guest room, crouched over a phone, listening to my husband plan my erasure in a voice he used to whisper "I love you" in. I think about how close I came to not checking that monitor at all, how easily I could have driven away for real, suitcases packed, believing space was the answer, while he moved his plan forward without me watching. Emma is 2.5 now. She doesn't know any of this, and someday, if she asks, I'll tell her the truth in whatever way a person can tell a child the truth about the year her father tried to take everything and her mother quietly, carefully, made sure he couldn't. I didn't leave that night. Not really. I just stopped being the woman he thought he was talking about, and started becoming the one he never saw coming.